from an HR standpoint, we should operate with wide domains. We can't break the law. You can't bend the law. What I'm saying is that I am a firm believer that what we need to do is we need to create policy manuals and handbooks that provide managers the ability to treat individuals in the way that an individual should be treated. And then we as HR people work to equip the manager on how to do that.
Don't conduct your analysis in isolation because data is so incredibly powerful.
Not defending just the tribe, but defending the organization.
Those creative people that you really want to keep empowered, keep excited, keep motivated, keep thinking.
A good experience pays dividends down the line.
Stereotypes tend to break down in proximity.
Welcome to We're Only Human, a podcast about human resources, business, technology, and the workplace. My name is Ben Eubanks, your host, and I'm so glad you're here.
Hey everyone, Ben Eubanks here. Welcome to We're Only Human. So glad you're with us and looking forward to a really incredible conversation with Jason Lawson today. We're going to dive into creating relationships with our leaders, building stakeholder connections. We're going to talk about trust. We're going to talk about DEI and all these other sorts of things that are priorities for us right now. And Jason's going to share some practical advice. Welcome, friend. Glad to have you.
Thank you, Ben. I really appreciate it. And for those who are listening, Ben is a friend. And he is, in my opinion, one of the top thought leaders in HR. So thank you for the time.
All right. The check is in the mail, Jason. And in the meantime, while you're waiting on that check to arrive, would you take a minute and tell the audience more about who you are, what you do, please?
Sure. Again, name is Jason Lawson. I've worked for over 30 years in human resources. The last, I'd say 5 to 8 in either a VP or a CHR role. Currently, I'm looking for my next opportunity, just to be blunt about it. But have worked in head of HR now for a number of years at my last 2 companies.
Before we get into the conversation today, I want to ask you something really quickly. Out of all the things you could be doing, you could be a rocket scientist, you could be a whatever, like why HR?
Wow, that's a great question. HR kind of found me. I think that my story isn't unique to a lot of other people in terms of I won't go into how I got in HR. But what I enjoy the most about HR, and just to be totally transparent, if I could start my entire life over again, I would probably be a basketball coach. That's just something that's I've discovered late in life. That was actually my passion, but hey, whatever. But if I'm doing HR, which I am, I love the variety of HR. I love the fact that with benefits one day, it's comp the next, and it are all the same day. Employee relations, all these different things are coming at you. And I love the fact, and we'll talk about it later. I love the fact that there aren't a lot of prescriptive answers in HR, that you have to challenge yourself to think. And I love that kind of ambiguity of the moment and figuring out what the right choice is. This is how my view of human capital is evolving. And it really is based around some things that, and this is fine as being quarter, are some personal things to me. For example, I won't mention the relationship, but I know someone who works he's a beer distributor. And he's very close to me. And I will talk to him about, tell me what your challenges are at work. And the reason why I do that is because as a person who has worked in the corporate office and who has made policies and made suggestions around things that impact just that type of worker, right? That worker who comes into the office, grabs his things, goes out to wherever he does, whether it's installing insulation or installing cable or distributing beer, and then comes back and he tells me stuff. And I just think to myself, that is some bad HR or bad management. And that begins to impact the way I think. So another situation, another person close to me, and she was telling me a story. She started a job and she lives in a smaller town, and she has a medical condition that requires her to have her blood drawn every other month. Now, the insurance that she has, there isn't a lab that is close to where she lives. So she has to drive like an hour and a half or 2 hours into a larger city just to get her blood drawn. The doctor that she sees is in this larger city. And so the doctor says, how about we just do this? When you come to have your blood drawn, then you'll also come see me. I live in Columbus, Ohio. So what could be a 15-minute, half-hour transaction ends up being an entire day for her because she has to leave has to drive to the city, has to get a blood drawn, see the doctor, drive back. That's a whole day, right? She gets 10 days of PTO every single year are being used with this
Keep her alive.
specific thing.
To keep her alive.
Keep her alive. Exactly. And so now she has 4 other days. And this person I'm talking about has custody of her grandchildren. And I hear those are real stories. Those are real people. And I have to say, I have been the one that has said, nope, this is the policy. Who needs more than 10 days off in their first year? Or things like, I've been the one that have said that. But you hear that story and you think to yourself, guys, that's just stupid. Like, why can't we figure out a way where if we know this is the situation and we know this is what this person is going through, why can't we just say, as long as you bring a doctor's note in for this situation, we're going to pay you for the day and we're not going to count it against your PTO. Why can't we do that? You have a good employee, 6 days really is going to make or break your, and if someone says, how come it's not fair that this person gets to do this and I get, my response would be, you don't have that medical condition. Somewhere in this whole ecosphere of employment, we've forgotten that people are people and that our role in particular in HR and as managers is to treat people like people.
That shouldn't sound so novel, Jason.
It shouldn't. Like I said, and to be very clear, I have been the one at different times that has said 10 days of the first year, that's the rule, that's the policy, but we move on. And then you hear stories like that and you're like, that's stupid.
There's
Actually, it's inhumane. And that at its literal definition of inhumane, meaning that you're not treating a person like a human, in my opinion. And here's the other part too, right? That really, this is something I've always felt like tried to grind your gears. I know that in the role that I have had, I've been in management now of my 30 plus years in HR. I've been in management or exempt employee for 28 of them. If it were me, I wouldn't have to use a day. I would be able to just do this without taking time away from the 10 days of vacation or PTO that I have. And how unfair is that?
I did the math really quickly. But based on the actual days you're working in the year, it fluctuates a little bit with 2% of a year, basically. 2% of the whole year. And is this person worth it? Do we want to invest in them? Are we willing to accommodate? Like all those kind of things. I was going to say, you can get into the legal side of, is this an accommodation going to make this work for them? But at the end of the day, it just comes down to, let's treat this person like we would want to be treated in the same situation. Yes. Keep going on 6 days a week.
Imagine the other side, right? Imagine the side of when she comes to you with this and she says, I know that I have 10 days. And you as the manager say to her, hey, for these 6 days, don't worry about it. We're just going to count you as being here. We're not going to deduct it from your PTO. But imagine, that 2%, right? Investment. Imagine what that says to that person and what you'll get back from that middle most 6 days.
So there's a company based in Ohio, Hot Chicken Takeover. And one of the things they do there is they do a lot of fair chance hiring. And their leadership said, listen, when I give someone a chance when no one else will, they repay that with loyalty tenfold. The turnover in fast food and restaurants like QSRs is off the charts. Us, it's pretty darn good because like, you gave me a chance and I'm going to stick with you.
Yes. I've been a long article about them a few years ago because Hot Chicken Takeover is based in where I am. And by the way, the chicken's actually really good. I've been there a couple times. Yeah, but I read the exact same thing. I think it's a fascinating idea that because of something I did negatively that impacted my life, has to impact my life for the rest of my life. That seems inhumane that we're not treating people like humans.
Okay. So you've given me some things here on stuff that we're not doing correctly. And again, you've admitted the audience can't see me raise my hand over here when you're saying, I've screwed this up too. Okay. Usually when I'm giving some advice, like I did this wrong the first time, I can tell you from the research or from my own experience, this is the right way to do it the next time. But what should we do? Like you're talking about be humane, but what more fundamental things? Because that's not a policy we can write. That's not an approach we can take. No, approach maybe, but how do we actually put that into practice? You know what I mean? Like do this day to day. and look for those situations, those opportunities to be a little more human instead of more policy centric or just based on the rules?
My approach to HR, and this has evolved over time, I'll be honest, but I've always been this way. But I will tell you that even as I get a little older, a little more seasoned, that I get more and more convicted with this approach, which is that from an HR standpoint, we should operate with wide domains. We can't break the law. You can't bend the law. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that I am a firm believer that what we need to do is we need to create policy manuals and handbooks and such that provide managers the ability to treat individuals in the way that an individual should be treated. And then we as HR people work to equip the manager on how to do that, right? Like we shouldn't be the ones telling them what to do. We should be the ones helping to equip them, but now they now know what to do. My last employer, we worked on creating a handbook and we worked on consolidating a bunch of handbooks down into one. And there was a couple different conversations and I said, no, we're not doing a point system, for example, and with attendance. No, the expectation is that you come to work every day, you come on time and you stay for your entire shift. And if you don't on a consistent basis, there could be consequences for that, right? That's about as much of an attendance policy as we should need, because that now as a manager, I can manage that. I can deal with that. I worked early in my career under a point system and it forces you to make decisions as an individual maybe you wouldn't make. It also forces you to game the system. It was a situation where when you got to 6 points and you got like a verbal warning, but if you went 30 days without having any absences, you dropped a point. Yeah. So what you would do is you would get to 5 and then you'd play the game and then you'd shape up. It's silly.
It's one of the things. I was going to use the word punitive a minute ago. You're talking about those things because it feels like you're trying to find a way to punish people and use the very archaic psychology behavior to force someone to do something. You're like, no, let's be good to them. Let's enable. I love the part you talk about enabling managers to actually do these things, because that was one of the things that always got me is I had a manager. I love Andy to death, but he would bring people to me when the problem came up. This is why we pay you to manage. This is actually part of your job. I think your job title. We're as clear as we can be. This is the part where you actually earn that. And so I would gently steer them back to him and say, here's how the competition needs to start, and then get out of the way and let him continue it from there. Every time something came up that he was uncomfortable with as a manager, he would try to be like, that's an HR thing. No, that's not.
No, that's not.
No,
my role as HR is to help you be better at your job. My role in HR is not to do the job for you. Like that's not how I have things I need to do as an HR person. That's ain't one of them.
You were telling me something before we started recording a minute ago that I think is so important for people to hear. You talked about how you love and appreciate a very collaborative environment when you're working. And would you go back and touch on that a little bit? Because I think that ties in here with this. I'm not telling you, I'm advising you because I'm a partner, right? Talk about that piece if you don't mind.
Yeah. I'll even go back a little bit, something we haven't talked about, which is that I happen to believe that the best way to influence people is through the building of relationships. You build a relationship and then you have the ability to influence. I think those two things go hand in hand. I think if you don't have the relationship, unless you have ultimate authority, then where you can just tell someone to do something and they have to do it because you are the authority figure, then otherwise I think it's challenging. The reality is this in human resources, and this is what I love about HR actually. There's very few things in HR that if a problem comes to you, that there's a prescriptive answer. There's oftentimes multiple things that you can do that some would be more successful than others. And the reality is you don't know what the outcome is going to be, right? But the fact is that you do have to work through that. Are you going to trust me if there's multiple answers on the table to help guide you to what maybe the best answer is? If we don't have a relationship, if that relationship is not built on trust. So I think that's where it starts. And then, we talked about this collaborative environment. If we have a relationship and you trust me and you respect me, well, now we can collaborate on what's going on in your world. And you can talk to me about one of my most proud days as an HR person. I'll never forget this. I was working in a company and I'm the VP of HR and we were going through a difficult time as a company. It had to do with material. And one of our regional presidents gives me a call and he says, Jason, I got to figure this thing out. Now, he calls me and tells me that when I say I have nothing to do with it, I literally had nothing to do with it.
Fully out. Yes.
And he wasn't calling like blaming me. No, he was calling me because he knew that, if there's a problem, then I'm going to do what I can to figure out how to solve it, right? I might talk to someone, I might influence someone this way, talk to someone this way, bring someone in the conversation. Like that's what I'm going to do. Even though in this particular situation, I literally had no influence at all over this problem. The reason why I bring it up is because that call came from years of relationship building and years of trust and years of collaboration and times where I would call him up and say, hey, I have this issue. Tell me what you think and get his view on what the issue was and elicit that. I just think that as HR people, as business people, that's what we need. That for me, the question that for the audience, the question was, what environment do I work best in? That's the environment I work best in an environment where I'm supporting you, you're supporting me, we're supporting each other, and all of those things are for the betterment of the business.
So a couple things that occurred to me as you're sharing that, Jason. One of the things we did some research this year for the first time in a while on things like payrolls with a core blocking and tackling of HR. One of the things that stood out to me is if someone is working at a company where they say they're so busy, they can't even hardly get their stuff done, they're much more likely to be at a company where their leadership sees them as purely administrative, not this partner, not this advisor, not this influencer and helper on the side there. It's just person going over there and just cranking out tasks. And so for all of you listening to this, you're hearing Jason talk about it. If you're in one of those places where you're just like completely too busy, then you need to find something to cut off, to defer, to delegate, because you have to do these relationship building pieces. If you ever want to have credibility, you ever want to have that level of trust that Jason's talking about here, that's so important. The other part I want to throw out there is you mentioned 2 words, 2 out of the 3 for the trifecta for employee belonging. So in our definition of that, we look at acceptance, respect, and appreciation. We're talking about being accepted and respected as an HR leader in the business. And we talk about belonging as a thing for individuals, but I think that also matters here. Do I feel like I belong in this organization as an HR leader who is credible, who is seen as an expert, who is seen as a resource for all these other people? I haven't stopped to think about a more abstract perspective, but I think it fits here in this conversation.
One of the conversations that I've been having internally and within myself, right? I've had my own thought process, and I've had this conversation with other kind of HR influencers, is this concept of the difference between bringing your best self to work, bringing your whole self to work, bringing your authentic self to work. And I happen to be a believer, even going back to the very initial question that what environment in which do I work best? One is one that I can be my authentic self. I need to be who I am because I'm a whole lot more than just an HR person, right? I like to coach basketball. My youngest
on that team. I didn't want to need some pointers on that when we're done here, Jason.
My youngest child is 24 years old, so I'm not coaching my kids anymore. But there's this group of guys that I've enjoyed coaching with, and I haven't the past couple of years because of professional responsibilities. But that's part of who I am, right? Part of who I am is I like to listen to gospel music, go to church, and that's part of who I am. Part of who I am is I like to go out with friends and sing karaoke. Those are all parts of Jason, right? Who I am. If I'm someplace where I can't be that, and I'm not going to fit. And this is in the conversation that we started with was a couple of years ago. I think DEI was really after George Floyd and everything else that we were talking about. We had bring our whole self to work. And I was talking to a friend of mine about that. And he said, no, Jason, you need to bring your best self to work. Your whole self, maybe. And I say at this point, there's aspects of me that maybe don't belong at work. Okay, I'm good with that. But the best self comment or conversation, I don't know I can be my best self every single day. That's a pretty high bar to hit every single day. But I can be me every single day and all aspects and parts and what that means of me. And to me, that's the environment that I think we as HR people are challenged to try to create, because I think that's where we live today is that people want to be them. They want to be themselves. They want to do their job, We want to do it well. And there's ways that, as you have to make sure that happens. But the other side to it, I think people want to be themselves.
You talked about being very collaborative with leaders in the business and breaking down the silos there. And that feels like another silo we artificially put up is, okay, Jason is an X, whatever your job title is. Marty, Mary, whoever, they're an X. And it's easier for us to bucket them as that thing and strip away everything else because for giving them work, whatever else, sure, okay, I get it. But this goes back to the very first thing you said, that human piece has to be part of decisions we're making, has to be layered. It's not, okay, this one will be a decision where I consider that, but this one's not. No, you have to be a human and see people as that all the time, or you're going to be making these weird decisions that are all over the map, right? It's inconsistent, and you're going to be like, I don't know that I can trust them because they don't have a level of consistency that I need. So I love pushing that one. I like the authentic self piece of that as well, really leaning in there. I would agree. Some weird, funny quirks that my wife puts up with would not serve me at work. And
there's moments. You don't need to see all of me all the time.
I do wish we had a beautiful clip to weave in here. I can vouch for the fact that you do some pretty incredible karaoke. One of my daughters is her baton twirling competition song this season is September. And ever I would think of you when I hear that song. So I got to appreciate that there. So I can vouch for that for the audience out there. Jason has some good things to bring in addition to being a killer HR leader and a great human above all else. Okay, I want to ask you a question. So we've talked about some of these challenges around this, and you and I both hear from HR leaders all the time, how can I get my seat at the table? I have to say it. How do I get more credibility? And you've talked about some of these things, building these relationships with leaders in the business and knowing what's going on. If someone is starting a new job, that's easy because I'll just ask a lot of questions and I'll flesh that out. Let's say someone's been in a job for a period of time though, and it's awkward to start that. How would you recommend someone begin building those bridges where there are none if they're at a company they've been at for a period of time?
I guess I would say a couple of things. One, it is never too late to start. Even if you've been there for 2 years, you can easily walk up to someone and say, hey, let's get some coffee. And I know you can say, I've been here for 2 years. You and I have not had an opportunity to really sit down and talk. I like to spend some time doing that. And the nice thing is that I think that in this world that we live in now, and let me be very clear that this is something that I've wrestled with for a couple of years. Working remotely, this means that you have to work harder to build connections. But it doesn't mean that you don't build connections. That's not an excuse. And what I would say as HR people, as managers, maybe we have to work harder doing it. It's easier to just walk up to someone if they're at a desk next to yours and start a conversation. But just because that opportunity doesn't exist, if you as a business has made the decision that we believe that having remote workers is critical to our ability to hire the best people, no matter where they are, etc. If that's the decision that you've made, then you have to go the next step and begin to build community. And that's a word that you and I haven't talked about a lot. I happen to think that culture, the word culture, is one of the most overused words in the business lexicon. And people talk about good culture, bad culture, etc. Okay, no. I happen to think what people want is community. Community. That's the word. Because the reality is this, right? We spend more of our waking hours with the people that we work with than we do with our own family. So how do I build an environment where people want to be there, where people want to commune with each other? My wife and I both watching Love is Blind. Trash, stupid, all those things. I know. But we watch it and we'll pause it and we'll talk during it and we'll say that person's an idiot or I can't believe they said that. We do all the things. Okay. But freely admit that I do this. My last company, I had made this comment and found out there were a couple of other people who watched Love is Blind as well. And then there were a few people who didn't watch, but when they found out that there were a few of us who were watching, they started watching. At the conclusion of the last season of Love is Blind, we did a Zoom call over lunch. Everyone brought their own lunch. We did a Zoom call where we had a powwow about the season of Love is Blind. Now, it was during lunch, so we weren't, quote unquote, taking time away from work. But it's no different. What you're trying to do is you're trying to create that same I bump into you space, and now you're at the cubicle and the person over hears it. Now the three of you are having a conversation that you did when you were in office. We were recreating that, but just in a Zoom setting. My point is that I think is what people want. They want to feel that connection to the organization, whether it's your department, whether it's the company, what it might be. I think that's community. And I think that's really what people are striving.
Okay. Let's say I'm on board with you here on this idea of community over culture.
Yeah.
We're there. Again, same question I asked you a minute ago. Let's get practical. We're going to start building community. We're going to really emphasize this. You gave a good example there of a completely terrible show. Goodness, I don't know how I can talk to you anymore, Chase, after that. That's a good example of that. Again, is it starting to ask questions and trying to find out where the Venn diagram of your people is, what sort of overlap, and how to start building those connections? What sort of?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a lot of different things. Like, for example, and this wasn't even my idea. So I need to freely admit this was another person who worked with me. This was her idea, which is that we created a HR chat room within our Google chat. And it was just, you could participate, you could not participate. And it was, hey, did you see that game last night? Hey, did you hear about this? Hey, and then people would chat back and forth about it. And again, it's to create some level of connection. And because our department was very much remote. It's whether you participate like in the YMCA has the athletic events or where they do all the different company challenges that they have. Maybe it's volunteering in the community and and maybe it's even in a remote environment. You could do a day where you have community involvement day where people go and serve in their own community. I think all those things are opportunities to build that. I think most of all, and I'll add a fourth before I get to the last one, which is, and have fun. Years ago, I interviewed for a job at Bath and Body Works. I'll never forget this. And the individual I was interviewing with said, when I get stressed out, I remember this one thing. We make people smell good. And trust me, there are high stress environments, right? You work for NASA, you work as a brain surgeon, okay. I'm freely admit, right? But those are the minority. Like the majority of us find a way to inject some level of humor and fun into your work. I think that's really important. And then I would say, try to create that place where people want to be. It goes back to treating people like humans and individuals.
I'm taking a bunch of notes over here because this is like a master class and being a HR leader that has impact. And I think that everybody listening here, they're listening to things like this, not just for entertainment, but because they want to have it. I think you've shared some tremendous things today along those lines. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you're like, I just want to get this one more good point across, or something you want to reiterate in the conversation before we wrap up?
Yeah, I would say for everyone, one of the things Ben did a good job of is ask me some thought-provoking questions in before we started. And one of them that you asked that I really had to think about was, what do I believe is the most important or impactful part of or challenging part of HR right now? Mm-hmm. And I would be remiss if we didn't talk about, I think, where diversity, equity, and inclusion are right now in our country. But I think it's interwoven with where as a country we are politically. And the challenge within human resources that we have to create environments where people feel safe, but at the same time, understanding that my view is not your view, and that's okay. Somehow we've lost that. We've lost the concept that, as Barack Obama used to say, we can disagree without being disagreeable. That idea has gone away. And I think that, to me, that is one of the biggest challenges, because I happen to believe that the diversity, equity, inclusion conversation really just goes all the way back to things that we've been talking about over this past half hour, Ben. It's not that complicated. It's, how do I as an individual want to be treated? Like, that's really what I think everything we talk about boils down to from a DEI perspective. And I think that it's gotten really convoluted. If we're being honest with ourselves as HR people, I'm not sure that we've always done a great job over the past 30, 40 years in terms of how we introduce these topics, in terms of the fact that for a very long time, DEI was boiled down to white and black. Like that was the whole conversation around DEI. And it leads to what I would tell you, I think, is the second answer to your question in terms of what our challenges are, which is how do we as HR people demonstrate our impact? And so let's go back to the DEI conversation, for example. How do we demonstrate that the work that we're doing, say in DEI or just in general, but how do we demonstrate that work has an impact on the organization? And I don't know that, and I don't think that we as HR people have done ourselves a lot of favors just in terms of we tend to shy away from data. We tend to shy away from that process type thinking. But if we can't demonstrate that the work that we do has value and has impact, then it's to your point. I think that's one of the reasons why we've leaned so heavily into the administratives, because I can tell you how many people called in for open enrollment. I can tell you how many people got their form done. I can tell you how many people completed their I-9, right? And that's easy. I can do that. But can I tell you the impact that the training program that I set up had on the individuals that attended, or the manager training program that I did, how that manager became a better manager than they were before they started? How do I demonstrate that? And what I'm telling you is that I don't have the answer to that question. Okay? But it is something that I think that we as HR people really need to dig into and really need to explore, because there is value there. That's the thing about it. There is value. There is impact. It's got to be more than intuitive.
That's one of the things that I have encouraged over the last year more and more is if you out there listening believe, just like Jason said, that the work you're doing is worthy, is valuable, has an impact, and you're not actually communicating any of that back to your leadership, then you're missing an opportunity, because we think that they see the work we do. We think that they understand the depth of expertise we have, and they don't. They see some level of outcome, but they may not be the ones we want them to be aware of. Hey, listen, we just saved the company this much money by making this one change. Employees are getting better insurance now, and great. Like all the outcomes, be really clear on those things. You don't want to be spending every meeting starting off with, look how great we are, but finding the moments to bring that into the conversation. They're going to see you, and it helps to build those relationships, the bridges, just like Jason, we talked about a little bit ago. That gives you a point to go back to, because if they're saying, hey, this is the problem for us, listen, we put this program together, here was the impact. I wonder if we could do something similar in your area. And suddenly you get to pitch and sell to them a little bit and show off the impact you've been having elsewhere.
Yeah. That's something that I think that we as, anyone listening, we as HR people really need to begin to lean into, because I think that's like our next step in this evolution of who we are as HR people and who we are as strategic partners.
Yes, tremendous. Okay. So if someone wants to connect with you, wants to learn more about just your perspective on things, or Jason's just a sharp guy, LinkedIn the best way to do that?
LinkedIn is the best way. Yes, I am on LinkedIn. My profile is pretty up to date. I am on there pretty much every single day for a variety of different reasons. So yeah, that would be the best way.
Okay. I'll make sure to drop that into the show notes so everyone can click right over and connect with you. Jason, thank you so much for
thank you.
pouring your heart out for us, for sharing some things, for encouraging us, for maybe stepping on our toes a little bit, but that's in a good way. We need that sometimes. I appreciate you for joining us.
Yeah, I happen to think, Ben, I think this is coming through a little bit. I'm pretty passionate about HR. I really am. I think that we have probably the most difficult job, maybe except for the CEO, in the organization, because we're dealing with people, we're affecting people, and I'm very passionate about our ability to do that. Yeah.
Tremendous. Thank you so much. To everybody else,
have a good one, sir.
Yes. To everybody else out there, thank you for joining us on We're Only Human. We'll catch you again next time.
Thank you so much for joining me on the show today. I'm honored to have you as a listener. If you enjoyed this episode, please take 10 seconds to rate it at iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to your podcast. Also, if you know a friend that could benefit from today's conversation, please pass it their way. After all, a rising tide lifts all ships. To see show notes, sponsor information, and our full show archives, visit onlyhumanshow.com.